Pharmaceutical industry spends a huge amount of money on campaign contributions and lobbying efforts. So I say to my colleagues in the Senate, maybe, just maybe, we might want to stand up for working people and the middle class rather than for the owners of the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical industry. Now, it's interesting, one never knows what to expect from the president. Every given day there is another adventure out there, but a couple of months ago, the president met with, I believe, the Australian Prime Minister, and that was in May. And the President Trump said that during that meeting, he said, Australia has, quote, better healthcare, end quote, better healthcare system than the United States. That's what Donald Trump said. So my Republican friends here who support President Trump, listen to what he said. Because on this one instance, he's not right very often. But I will confess that on this issue, he is right. In Australia, everyone is guaranteed health care as a right. Australia has a universal health care program called, ironically, Medicare, that provides all Australians with affordable, accessible, and high-quality health care. While the United States has the most expensive, bureaucratic, wasteful, and ineffective health care system in the world, Australia, it turns out, has one of the most efficient. President Trump was right. In 2014, Australia's healthcare system ranked 6th out of 55 countries in efficiency. The United States ranked 44th. Not only does Australia guarantee universal health coverage, it spends less than half what we spend on healthcare per capita. In 2015, they spent $4,500 while we spend almost $10,000. While the Australian government spent 9% of its GDP on healthcare, the United States spent nearly double that, 17%. Further, Mr. President, many healthcare services are far cheaper in Australia. An MRI costs about $350 in Australia versus $1,100 in the United States. One day in a hospital costs about $1,300 in Australia versus $4,300 in the United States. An appendectomy costs about $5,200 in Australia versus roughly $14,000 in the United States, etc., etc. Not only does Australia guarantee universal health care, spend less on health care per capita, and pay less than we do for many health services, they have better health outcomes. In 2014, the average life expectancy in Australia was 82.4 years compared to 78.8 years in the United States. They live longer in Australia. For context, according to a 2014 report from the World Health Organization, Australian men have the 3rd longest life expectancy, and Australian women have the 7th longest life expectancy in the world. The United States doesn't even crack the top 10 for life expectancy, despite spending so much more than any other country on health care. Mr. President, what all of this comes down to is the fact that we in America are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And the question that we have got to ask ourselves, and I hope that Senator Daines will address that question as he introduces his Medicare for All bill, is how does it happen that in Canada, every man, woman, and child is guaranteed health care? The same is true in the UK, in Germany, France, Australia, Japan, and every other major country on earth. How does it happen that every industrialized country understands that health care is a right of all people, because all of us get sick, all of us have accidents, not just the rich? How come every major country on earth says health care is a right except the United States? How come today we have 28 million without any health insurance, more who have high deductibles and high co-payments, who are underinsured, and the response of our Republican friends is to say 28 million uninsured, that's not enough. Let's throw another 22 million people off of health insurance. Our response should be to move forward and guarantee health care to all people, not throw another 22 million people off of health insurance. Now, I don't have the time to go into great detail as to why our wasteful and bureaucratic healthcare system ends up spending almost twice as much per capita as systems around the world. That is a subject for a lot of discussion, and I intend to play an active role in that discussion. But let me just say this, give you some examples. Just a few examples. Because we have such a bureaucratic and complicated system, because hospitals in America have got to deal with this person who has a $5,000 deductible, that person who has an $8,000 deductible, this person who has this, that person has that. They have to deal with dozens and dozens of different configurations for insurance. It requires an enormous amount of time, energy, and manpower to deal with those myriad of insurance companies. So the result of that is that the United States spends far more on hospital administrative costs than most other countries. These costs accounted for a quarter of total U.S. hospital spending in 2010 to 2011, more than $200 billion, over twice what was spent in Canada and in Scotland. What I would hope, if we don't sit around just worrying about the profits of the insurance companies, what I would hope that all of us would agree is that when we spend $1 on health care, we want that dollar to go to doctors, to nurses, to medicine. We want that dollar to go to the provision of health care, not to advertising, not to profiteering, not to dividends, not to outlandish CEO insurance company salaries, but to the actual provision of health care which keeps us well. And yet,